just TV, it's mind food. PBS Hawaiʻi, home is here.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and the Pacific since 1857, making a positive difference in the communities where we live and work.
Flash flooding can happen anywhere and at any time. It's one of the deadliest natural disasters because it combines the destructive power of a flood with rapid speed, catching many people off guard. Data from recent incidents here and around the country indicate that flash floods could happen more often and with more intensity. So how prepared are we to face this threat? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi. I'm Daryl Huff. According to the National Weather Service, a flash flood is flooding that begins within 6 hours and often is as little as 3 hours of heavy rainfall. It's the nation's top storm-related cause of death as waters rise quickly, catching people off guard. Across the country, the National Weather Service has issued a record number of flash flood warnings this year. Experts attribute the increase to a combination of factors, including climate change, improved forecasting, and urbanization. Tonight, we're asking our panel if the threat of flash floods in Hawaii is more frequent, more severe, and who is most at risk. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaiʻi YouTube page. Now to our guests. Elton Ushio has been with the Kauaʻi Emergency Management Agency since 2003 and has been leading the department for the past 10 years. During his time there, the agency has responded to multiple major disasters, including the Kaloko Dam failure in 2006 and the record-setting rain bomb in April of 2018. Edwin Matsuda is a licensed civil engineer at the Department of Land and Natural Resources. He is currently the Flood Control and Dam Safety Section Head, which oversees the Hawaii Dam Safety Program, the Hawaii General Flood Control Plan, and the Hawaii National Flood Insurance Program. Busy man. Alison Nugent is an associate professor of atmospheric science at UH Manoa. She earned her Ph.D. in geology and geophysics from Yale University and her Bachelor of Science degree from Harvard. Her research focuses on mountain rainfall and extreme rainfall in the tropics. And Patrick Blood is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. He's been a Weather Service forecaster for more than 2 decades, previously working in the Houston, Galveston, Texas office. He's previously worked as a broadcast meteorologist and as a U.S. Air Force veteran. Now, you know, in Hawaii, we've all experienced flash floods in one time or another, sometimes often near our house. Let me bounce off some of you guys, you folks, what your memories are, the most memorable flood experience that you've had. I'm going to start with Elton because Kauaʻi has had its share.
So most memorable, I mean, I've had a lot of experience with flash flooding even before my work in emergency management. As a child growing up on Kauaʻi and having an active outdoor recreational lifestyle, you know, with all the rainfall that Kauaʻi gets, our rivers and streams, I've experienced those firsthand at times while out and about. Something that has given me a lot of respect for the power of flash flooding in Mother Nature.
And then Edwin Matsuda with DLNR, you deal with the dam program. What have you experienced that strikes you to think about flash flooding?
As a child, similar to Elton, I think that, you know, I've seen some of those floods firsthand that have come through, like the New Year's floods that came near our neighborhood and some of the damage that has occurred there. And being in the dam safety program now, we've seen several dams have overtopping incidences, and just the destruction that can come after that, it's actually rather terrifying. Yeah.
Alison Nugent with UH Manoa, is there something special about Hawaii and the way this happens? And have you seen anything about Hawaii that jumps out at you?
I think that for flash flooding, you need a number of ingredients. You need to have a lot of moisture, you need to have some source of uplift, and we have our mountains and we're in the tropics, so it's really moist. So I think those two ingredients really make us prone to flash flooding.
And Patrick Brooks from the National Weather Service, what strikes you about anything you've experienced in your history that you'd like the viewers to know how bad this could be?
Well, I have my own personal horror story going through Hurricane Harvey back in 2017. I would just let folks know to think about your plan during periods of dry weather. Think about your particular situation and what you would do if faced with flash flooding. Is it safe to leave your home? Is it day? Is it nighttime? I know personally for me, I was stuck at the office during Harvey. My family was safe, they were in their house, but then we had to evacuate. And we have a saying in the National Weather Service that if you're on the road and there's water on the roadway, to turn around, do not drown. So if you're out on the road, be careful of any type of moving water. It doesn't take much to lift your car, and then once you're in your car, it could be a coffin. It could be a very dangerous situation.
Have we seen, and anyone can pitch in on this, are we seeing an increase in flash flooding in Hawaii? I mean, is that documented?
I'd have to defer to weather on that as far as frequency of incidences. I know for emergency management, we've always had a lot of activations for flash flood warnings, but it varies from year to year depending on just how much moisture we have on that given year. This year, for example, the wet season wasn't that active comparatively, but we did still have a number of activations.
It's easy to focus on the statistics here. Here in Hawaii, we don't get the number of flash floods that we normally see on the mainland, but it's that not falling asleep, being situationally aware. On average, we issue about 40 flash flood warnings a year in Hawaii.
We were talking earlier, you said that in some places on the mainland, it's spectacularly more than that.
Absolutely. We're just doing a study of particular areas on the mainland that they issue flash floods. And an area that popped out was the desert Southwest. An office like Flagstaff, Arizona, they issued 2,000 on average every, in the last 10 years, over 2,000, just because of the fact that they're so dry for so long, and then they get the monsoonal flow, get a bunch of rain over a very dry area. That's what caused the flashing effects of the flooding. You're hearing that wave coming at you. That's what's so dangerous about flash flooding is it can hit you so quickly. You have to be aware.
I think being on islands makes it worse. It pretty much accelerates. The difference from Mauka to Makai is really quick, and then floodwater comes down hour, sometimes less.
Are we always good at warning people in Hawaii? I mean, because the weather stops above a mountain, but sometimes it'll go down one valley and not the other valley. It gets quite baffling. Alison, what is it about our topography that makes flash floods in Hawaii maybe different from other places?
So the watersheds in Hawaii are really small compared to the mainland. And so like you said, if the rain falls here versus here, it might be in this valley or this valley. So I think that forecasts are really good with saying the ingredients are here. There's a high chance that we're going to get some heavy rainfall, but the exact location is really hard to pinpoint model to model. Even if you run 50 different models, they're all going to give you different answers, and you're going to get heavy rainfall somewhere on the mountains, somewhere in the islands, but it could be in one small watershed or the next one, and that makes a huge difference for the people on the ground. But the watersheds themselves are really steep and narrow, and so they funnel water really quickly to the lowest point, and that's how it accumulates and builds up and leads to such high hazard.
Edwin, Matsuda, one of your jobs is to try and create maps about what might happen if a dam fails. Can you describe how you figure that out?
Sure. So we've contracted with consultants. Most of our evacuation maps were actually modeled from the Pacific Disaster Center on Maui, and they run it through a 2D engineering model using the topography that's there, and simulate dam failures with the dams full of water, no outside rainfall, and just breaking it. So we call those sunny day breaches. And they're very similar to what you might experience during a flash flood, where a dam would fill up and then overflow. So it would be a little bit more for a rain event, but it is also somewhat a conservative look at what it would be, because normally like what we call a sunny day break like that, there's no real warning. So it is like a true flash flood in a sense where it just comes upon the people downstream if they're not aware.
You know, but if you're doing a map, right, you have to be as precise as you can be, right? Because someone who's on one side of the map is going to have to pay for flood insurance, and the person on the other side of the line is off the hook, right? Is that what those maps are primarily for?
No.
Okay.
So yeah.
Because we mentioned in your introduction that the flood zone maps, they're not in your purview, or
So there are two different maps. There's a flood insurance rate map, which FEMA actually develops throughout the nation, and those are the maps that are actually used for determining flood insurance. And historically, that has been how FEMA would assign rates. FEMA now has a new rating system 2.0 that they do, and there's a number of different factors that go into it: how close you are from the shoreline, the topography around your immediate area of your house, how far you're away from a stream. So all these different factors now come into play as to how they rate your flood insurance. The dam evacuation maps that we have, that I was mentioning earlier, those are currently not included in the insurance calculations that FEMA uses.
Okay, all right. Let me ask Elton, in your experience on Kauaʻi, how predictable are those courses of where a flood might go? I mean, it seems like people are always getting surprised by where the flooding happens, even though it might have happened in the same place. I never saw it like this before.
So we haven't had a dam failure, in the time when we've had actual models for dam breaks. As far as, we look back at the historical record. I think the dam failure modeling was after the Kauaʻi disaster, right, if I recall. But if we're looking at other flood modeling, like the firm maps or the flood insurance rate maps that Ed mentioned earlier, I do know that when we had the record-setting 2018 rainfall event, our GIS folks did a good job of mapping out, some of the results of our damage assessments in the communities where homes may have been destroyed or had heavy damage, and what have you. And I did ask the GIS folks, can you overlay that against the flood zones? And they did, and there was a pretty close correlation between what FEMA would call, higher flood risk area and where we saw the major damage or destroyed properties. And sometimes on the edge, it got into the more moderate risk, like the 500-year flood areas, or between, the 100 and the 500 threshold. But, there's some correlation there. So lacking, like dam failure modeling for other watersheds or other areas, I think the flood insurance rate maps are at least something that people can look at to determine the risks for their respective areas.
Where can they find those?
So FEMA does have a national flood hazard layer viewer that they have. Our department also put out a tool called the Flood Hazard Assessment Tool. It's where I would normally refer people. We've been having some issues in it just the last 2 weeks, but we're working on revising that to get it back up on the air. But if you go to floods.hawaii.gov, there'll be a link off of that, and you can get to that flood hazard assessment tool, and you can zoom in to your property. You can see the firm maps, the flood insurance rate maps overlaid on imagery, so you can see what your risks are.
Okay, but right now that's not operating?
It's operating.
So people don't go running over the computer right now?
If you zoom in on the map just using your mouse, and you can just zoom in on the island and your neighborhood, you can get your flood zone. It's just the search feature with the address is currently having an issue.
So a question has come in from Gordon from Pololo, and I can understand why he's asking this. Are they planning to dredge the Alawai again? If so, when? I know none of you are directly involved with that question, but I think it raises the question of what can you do about it? What do you have to prepare? Who should be preparing for this kind of thing? Patrick Blood, I mean, what kind of places do you think people need to be most concerned if they don't have a lot of history with,
Well, immediately what comes to mind is your home, is your safe space. Depending on the ferocity of the water, whether it's daytime or nighttime, I would say that if you stay in your home, make sure your power's off. You're more safe in your home than you would be exiting your home. Now, everybody has a different situation. There might be a situation where you have to leave that home due to the fast running water. You know, something came to mind where I live over in Kaneohe. There are concrete culverts that always get filled with the debris. And I go down to that culvert at least twice a year and I clean that debris out. And then we live off the H3. And there has been history of that H3 aqueduct being clogged. So make sure you look at where you live and see what you can do around your property to mitigate the fact of maybe that damming situation. Clean that debris up around those concrete culverts. That's what I would do. But you know, back to your original question, I would say that your home is your safe space. If you have to leave, make sure you have a plan and make sure you know where you're going. A plan B, so that person on the other end knows to expect you.
Specifically, would that be for flash flood?
It would be for any type of flooding.
Right.
So we don't want to get stuck in the semantics of flash flooding, flooding.
Well, I mean, I think almost all Hawaii floods are flash floods.
Yes,
right?
they're pretty much all flash floods, as Dr. Nugent was saying, that they're very flashy because of the terrain and the intense rainfall that we get here in the tropics.
And then how much does, Dr. Nugent, how much does debris in a stream that's accumulated, sometimes a stream will go a long time before it gets sort of washed out by a flood. How much does debris or other blockages affect the danger of a flash flood or the risk of a flash flood?
So I was involved in a study on Kauaʻi, actually, where we were speaking with the community members about the 2018 April record-setting flood. And one of the things that was the most interesting to me about what the community members said was that the albizia trees in the stream were one of the biggest issues. So the albizia trees and the branches that were in the stream, they blocked up by the roads, and they led to these kind of flooding pulses that, you know, a huge wall of water came, and then it would get a little better, and then another huge wall of water. So I don't know that I'm answering your question directly.
No,
That's
you
not
are,
exactly
because
my
you know,
expertise.
and I'll kind of go with that for a minute. So is it the debris pile is kind of moving down, and then water accumulates behind it, and then it breaks through, and then the debris pile. So debris has a lot to do with the unpredictability, certainly, of it.
Yeah, albizia trees particularly are really bad with flooding. When there's heavy rain, they just drop their branches, and they don't have very deep roots, so they fall over really easily. And so, yeah, imagine a road with a stream going under it. The albizia trees would just dam it up like a beaver.
You know, Elton, Ushio, what's the county's ability to deal with something like that in advance of flash flooding?
So, you know, with the county, you know, the drainages that we're responsible for, we'll do our best to go and mitigate ahead of time. You know, we'll even help with some clearing of outflows into the ocean in some areas. But, you know, it really falls to what we call the whole community approach, sorry. So that's everyone, all levels of government, whatever, whose ever responsibility, private sector, private landowners, if they can maintain those drainages and outflows, you know, collectively, that's the only way that we can address the problem. I do want to add something though, because you had worked on the study on Kauaʻi. So separate from albizia, you know, our county was fortunate to get some funds through the state legislature following the 2018 floods. And part of those funds went towards mitigation projects, community-driven. So we did some sub-grants. And one of them did
the sub-grants, so like you find a community group that's willing to do some work, and you support them.
By RFPs, you know, we put requests for proposals out and got these projects that got funded. And one of them actually did some clearing of vegetation along the Hanalei River. And we really weren't, we didn't know if it would work or not, but as Patrick would probably tell you, you know, we had some subsequent flash flood warning events where our prior stream gauge threshold an hour upstream was hit, and it didn't result in flooding. So at least for those closer to the threshold events, it did help mitigate.
You know, that brings up a question for Edwin Matsuda. So the dam safety branch, or your branch, is primarily built around the dam issue. But does the state or the county or anybody have the authority to go up and down a watershed and inform a private owner or somebody that you need to clear this or you're going to be liable or something? Is there something where they can do that?
I believe that there's some ability for county enforcement in some of the statutes that are out there for drainage ways, that the counties would have that authority to issue out citations and warnings to private individuals, and if it's the state-owned property, that they can actually inform the state to that, you know, that waterway would need to be cleared.
But in terms of your guys, if you guys, does anyone routinely inspect these areas below the?
I think for the ones that are known issues, like the caller that was mentioning the Alawai, you know, that's just a natural process of sediment transport from the mountains as it goes through, and it just deposits itself when the velocities get lower, like in those kind of canals, and so over time it will, you know, develop and they would need to be dredged, and so I think that's why the Alawai is routinely dredged. I don't know what the frequency is on it, but yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about safety. How do I know, and maybe there's some warning systems, how do I know that I should really be concerned about the weather and whether it's going to be a flash flood? Patrick Blood from National Weather Service, how do I know?
How do you know when
that there might be a flash flood that I should be concerned about?
Well, it just takes the situational awareness of understanding that you need to be following the forecasts. Our rainy season is typically, you know, since we're in the tropics, we're 20 degrees north, we have a wet and a dry season. Been abnormally dry this year, but our rainy season starts in like October. So those months of October through like March or April is when we tend to get the most rain. So just being more situationally aware of your situation and understanding that you need to have a plan, then we hit that plan home. Make sure you make your plan now. It's really dependent upon where you exactly live and your family situation. But how do you know? A lot of times we're issuing warnings before we issue watches just because of the complexities of meteorology. So it's taking that a whole community approach and understanding that not only do you need to mitigate well before the storm, but if you hear, for instance, I heard in the forecast that we're expecting more rain later on in the week. We have an upper level low that's going to drop over. So start following the forecast. Make sure that you have on your phone bookmark radar to follow the radar. I mean, we do have our limitations of radar due to the terrain and all that, but make sure that you have your areas, your sources available, whether it be the National Weather Service, local media. Make sure you're able to get on your phone right away and kind of check the forecast and be aware. And make sure that you do not get stuck. So if you had plans, you're going to be out and there's heavy rainfall, maybe alter those plans a little bit.
I remember the New Year's Eve flood. There were a lot of people out and about, and then they got stuck and were able to get home. I remember, Edwin, what do you remember about that night? Were you home? Were you trying to figure it out?
I was thinking it was Halloween, right? And
was it Halloween or was it New Year's Eve?
Sorry, that was the New Year's one. This was the Halloween one. I just remember going out afterwards the next morning and seeing manholes that looked like anthills that, you know, the floodways would just carve out the water, the streets. And yeah, kind of going back to the other question though, you know, as far as knowing your risks, we do some public outreaches at the BIA shows and different hazard awareness workshops around the neighborhood. And I think what Elton brought up is that knowing the flood insurance rate maps that FEMA puts out, that's a good start. And it covers the majority of the areas that people can look at. And usually what we hear of when we do these outreaches from people is that they'll mention a flood that they remember and they'll say they never expected it. It's never rained like that. But then when you look at the flood insurance rate maps, it's like, well, you're in a high risk area. So, you know, it's,
someone has figured it out, right?
Yeah, and it's important to know right now because Honolulu is actually going through a map revision for that. And so there's something like 4,000 properties that are going to be newly mapped into a high risk area.
Really?
So that's going to actually come into be regulated next year. So
that's a lot of properties.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can I say something about situational awareness though? Because I think it's easy to say be situationally aware, but how do you actually do that? So if I were outside and I looked towards the mountains and I saw really tall clouds with like puffy, rounded edges, or if it was just completely overcast, and so maybe you can't see beyond the low-level clouds to see if there are deep, deep clouds. But typically when it's raining, you can tell. Sometimes if you see some big, juicy clouds, you know it's raining hard somewhere. And if that is in the mountains upstream from where you are, and the water would flow from there to where you are, then don't go hiking up a stream or something like that, because you can have a flash flood even if it's not raining where you are. So it doesn't have to be raining where you are in order for a flash flood to impact you.
Elton, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so from an emergency management perspective, I think it's important to know that preparedness and resilience really start at the individual and household levels. Everyone's kuleana, everyone's business. We in our respective positions will do our best to inform the public and keep everyone safe, but it really starts at home. So that starts with knowing the hazards for the areas in which you live, work, or frequent. It means having multiple means of notification. So cell alerts on your phones, subscribing to apps, landline notifications, even having some of those radios that'll turn on with the EAS or Emergency Alert System signal at home. Because there are a lot of tools in our proverbial quiver of how we inform and warn the public, but various technologies can fail, so it's good to have multiple means and stay informed ahead of time.
It also strikes me that in all the flood stories I've covered here, an awful lot of times it's children that are getting in trouble. So I guess one of the messages would be talk to your kids and go grab your kids if you're seeing these conditions, because the kids aren't going to figure it out. They're going to go, oh, fun, let's go play in the water. Right?
Yeah, don't play in the streams.
Yeah,
go for hikes.
But I mean,
nasty water.
Yeah, and it's very nasty water too. I'm getting a number of questions, Edwin, about dams, and I'm going to find a couple of them because a couple are very specific. Please name the dams on Oahu other than Ho'omaluhia and Nu'uanu. Certainly one of the biggest ones is Lake Wilson's Dam. Last time it rained hard, I went out to the typical place you go, which is that village right down by past Wailua. Yeah, yeah, and those people were hunkered down, But is there, please, what other places should people literally do a little research to make sure that?
So they can go on to dams.hawaii.gov, our website, and there's a tab there to see a GIS map, which will actually show them where all the maps are that we regulate throughout the state. Obviously, there are more dams that are smaller that don't fall into our regulations that are also there. But on Oahu, there's some on the North Shore, Opaiula. There's some for Dole Plantation. Mm-hmm. There's Upper Kapahi. I forgot the name. It's eluding me right at the moment. But
we've talked before. You're regulating over 100 dams, active dams now, right?
Right.
And
on Oahu, there's not too many. There's maybe like 10 or 12. There's Waimanalo. There's one there.
There's one above Haleiwa, a couple above Haleiwa that people were concerned about before.
Opaiula, that's there. There was Upper Halemano. That's the one I was thinking of.
And do you have specific warning devices on those dams that are remote that would be triggered if they start to get too high?
We've started to partner with the University of Hawaii Sea Level Center, and we've started installing some real-time water level gauges on some of these structures that we want to get an eye on. So for Lake Wilson, has a gauge on that one. You can see that one is actually with the USGS. So the USGS actually has gauges that they monitor, both stream, rain, and then we have a few reservoirs that they monitor.
Patrick, what is the state of technology now for this kind of warning systems?
Well, compared to 20, 30 years ago, it's a much more advanced technology. Of course, we have multiple radars on multiple islands. We have limitations with those radars because of the topography. but we also have mini stream gauges that alert us as far as rain gauges. But again, you need to have that certain amount of rainfall in that certain area. A lot of times it's just, for us in the Weather Service, we're monitoring the radar. We know the limitations of the data. And for more seasoned forecasters, we sort of can see it coming. So a lot of times it's good to have that experience and know, okay, I've seen this before, this analog pattern. But as far as technology goes, it's as good as it's going to get right now. You know, as far as equipment, we have the Doppler radars. For us in Oahu, we have Molokai, the 2 radars on Big Island. And then, of course, we have the one in Kauaʻi. And we do have pretty good stream gauges. And as Elton was saying, that those are good indications of upstream flooding. I liked what Alison was saying about it doesn't necessarily have to be raining hard where you're at. It could be raining hard upstream if you're downstream. So
well, the other thing that's interesting, and we talked a little bit about Koloko, and I think it's worth revisiting. You know, I have another question from Monica. Do all people who live below a dam know that they live below a dam to the point they're aware of the potential danger? I mean, that dam took out a house full of people that when it collapsed, and I think that taught us an awful lot of lessons, especially on Kauaʻi and statewide. Do you folks have a plan for each of these dams, how to respond as a county emergency alert?
So there's been a lot of improvements since the Koloko disaster, and then Ed would really be the subject matter expert on this one. But you know, the regulated dams, high hazard dams, they have a emergency action plan that you know, captures the role of the owner operator, how those emergency notifications would take place, those flow modeling and evacuation zones have been developed, so we know what areas we would have to warn and evacuate. Even if there's a minor issue with a dam, we are already notified up front.
Tell me the story, though. I'd like to repeat it for viewers, because we spoke about it before. When Koloko failed, there was another dam. I don't remember if it was upstream or downstream from Koloko.
Morita Reservoir was downstream, but
what had to happen to there was fear that that second dam was going to burst even after it stopped raining.
So Koloko, the flood wave from Koloko went through, it overtopped Morita Reservoir, which then, as it was going over, it eroded the back half of the embankment. So there was only the top half of the embankment, half of it was gone, and it still had a full pool of water in the reservoir, and so it was starting to leak. And so we did what was called a forced breach with the county within.
It was a county gear, right? The county bulldozers and stuff. You worked together.
We worked together with the county, and I think it was a private contractor that came out there with the excavator and carved a breach, a channel around the
within a few hours, right? I mean, it was pretty fast work, as I recall.
It was pretty fast. I can't say exactly what the time frame was. Yeah.
And that relieved the pressure. Alison, talk to me about the effect of dams on a flash flood. You know, from Mauka to Makai, when there's a dam somewhere between the mountain and the homes below, what's the impact of how the water acts when it's moving through dams? And if a dam breaches, I guess, what's the effect of having dams upstream of you when it comes to trying to gauge what's going to happen and what fear level you should have?
I can't say I'm a dam expert, but I would say that when you have a reservoir that holds the water, you have rain upstream, it holds the water, and then depending on how frequently the water is released from that reservoir, hopefully not all at once, then that could, I guess it could increase your risk because...
Yeah, because it's holding up the water and then it could go all of a sudden.
Yeah, whereas if there were just a stream, then it would just all come down at once rather than making such a large volume of water.
Yeah, I think the hard part, just to add on to that.
No, please go ahead.
A lot of the majority of our reservoirs here in dams were built in support of sugarcane and pineapple back in the early 19th century, right? And so at that time, they didn't have the modern standards that we have currently. They didn't have the upstream population, runoff that's currently coming into these structures. And so they weren't designed to handle those types of floods. And that's the reason why a lot of them need retrofit right now. But there are some dams, we do have two that I can think of off the top of my head that were developed for flood control purposes. So Kaneohe Dam, Ho'omalahia, on the windward side came about as a result of devastating floods that had come through Kaneohe town. And so
that was quite a while ago, though,
that
right?
was quite a while ago, and they built this dam to actually attenuate or slow down the flood water, so that it fills up really fast, but it releases it somewhat slower.
So in that case, the dam reduces your risk.
Correct.
And are most of the dams for irrigation historically then?
Yeah.
That does bring up the subject that I was trying to get at when they brought up the alawai, is that there's engineering safety that can be worked into a watershed. I'm familiar with Kapolei, which was just a big sugarcane field, but when they developed the housing out there, one of the people who was trying to decide whether they wanted to be the house builder there said the state was requiring a lot of flood control measures, including, I think, the golf course itself is a flood control measure. And they have other ways of, big conduits, or not really, the big concrete ways of going through. Are we going to have to see more of that, in order, like Alawai, to really protect the urban areas in Hawaii? Anybody could pitch in on this. I don't know which one of you is an expert, but from what you're thinking and you see in the patterns, are we going to need more engineering solutions to the risk of flash flooding?
I can speak a little bit from what I've seen in some of the flood-prone areas that we have here in Hawaii. And it's not necessarily limited to town. I think you'll see it on the windward side as well. As we have a large watershed in the back. It comes straight through the mountains really rapidly, funnels down, and then it hits the flat area, which is where, right before the ocean, which is where a lot of people start to develop. And historically, in the past, engineering-wise, we've channelized it and we've straightened it out. That's not the natural course of how a stream would normally work. And so, we've brought the public right up against the hazard potentially there. And so if those drainage ways are not sized properly, or they're not, for a number of reasons, they can they can get overwhelmed by a flood that comes down, and that's what.
Well, remembering the flood on Kalakaua Avenue, remember that one? It was like, it's covering Kalakaua Avenue all the way down through Waikiki, and that was the Nuuanu area, right? Like 3 streams converge in that one place, and something blocked the old drainage system.
But barring anything blocking a drainage way, a lot of times open spaces like golf courses, I think on Hilo side they have a soccer field that they use for flood attenuation there. That's a good way to actually kind of protect your area, and it's a natural feature that can be incorporated into something that for flood prevention, just as long as people are aware that that's that happens, and so that kids
don't go play soccer when it's raining.
Right.
In the mainland, you were in Houston, for example, and you're very familiar with the berms and the flood control systems there that control the rivers and so on. Are we seeing that those are often inadequate given the amount of storms we're having now?
Well, in the Houston area, it's just one big concrete island. But the advantage that we had in Texas was we had land. We had the ability to take areas and put storage areas and make channels larger. But unfortunately, they were building homes and reservoirs. And that was some of the problem that we had.
Yeah,
So,
how did that happen?
Well, it's just, I don't know the politics behind it, but there were a lot of homes that were actually built inside of reservoirs that obviously flooded. That's reservoirs. So, here in Hawaii, this is in Kaneohe with the botanical gardens, using these spaces as green spaces is very practical. So I think here in Hawaii, we have to be more strategic from an engineering standpoint as far as, there's not a whole lot of new building going on. In Houston, you just had all this farmland that was just being, built up. So they had land to, feed into the bayou system. Here, it's the stream system. So I think here you just have to have better engineering, and you have to look at your history. Talking about the flooding, the 10-year, the 50-year, the 100-year. Yes, we're getting more extreme events, but we have to look at our history and say, okay, what would happen? There's a lot of great hydrological models out there that you can run to see. Engineers are looking at that. The Corps of Engineers are looking at that. So, just to be a little smarter here in Hawaii, because we don't have that land advantage that we had in Texas.
You got to be strategic.
Yeah, so I don't know the engineering, but when Mayor Kawakami took our cabinet out to one of our field outings, we got to see the county's Limaola housing development. And they had a pretty impressive looking flood control measures and drainages built. And lo and behold, when we had that intense 2024 rain event, spectacular rain event, the property managers, or one of them, relayed to us that it wasn't even stressed to capacity. And as you know, that was a very significant event. So the measures worked. So
Yes.
I can say firsthand that some of that engineering being incorporated into developments was effective there.
I've got a question here, a couple of questions about what places are prone to one place or another. And one of the questions is, have weather patterns in our area in the Pacific changed enough that the existing maps or other tools currently are used are updated? I think that you just mentioned they're updated fairly frequently. How often do you update them?
I wouldn't say they're fairly frequently, but they do require updates periodically, I would say. And it just varies on the map. I think for this particular one, on Honolulu, we haven't seen that update, a major update, since 2011. I think was the last time that they really did. And that was primarily for the coastal areas from a lot of the storm run from the hurricanes.
Alison, Nugent, have we seen a lot of change in the climate around here since 2011 that we should be?
I don't know since 2011, but if you look over much longer time periods, I mean, globally we're seeing changes in weather where the wet gets wetter and the dry gets wet. The wet gets wetter and the dry gets drier. And so we're kind of seeing a change in the redistribution of where precipitation is falling. And that's partly to do with warmer temperatures. If you have, for every 1 degree Fahrenheit, or 1 degree Celsius, 2.2 degrees Fahrenheit, you can have the atmosphere can hold 7% more moisture. So it doesn't always do that, but it can hold more moisture. And so if you have a juicier cloud, then it's likely to rain out faster. And so you see heavier rain some places, and then that leaves less rain for the downstream areas.
And I think that also trade winds frequency, for a while we were way down in how many days we had a trade winds. Now it seems like it's back to what I remember being normal again. I mean, am I perceiving that correctly, or how big a deal is our trade wind frequency, and is that being affected?
So absolutely, like when the rainfall that we get depends on the upstream conditions that are coming into the island. So how much moisture is coming in, what the wind speed and direction is. So if it goes this direction versus this direction, that'll make a difference to where the rain is falling. As to like the specifics over the last 15 years, I can't say.
I just remember interviewing the climatologist at UH when he had done a study, and he was alarmed at how little trade winds were. And like within a couple of years, it was back up to 80 or 85%. And so it's confusing, to people, and to make assumptions and assume things. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say, not to get into the weeds too much, and this is for a lot of weather nerds out there, but usually when
I'm getting questions from weather nerds here.
Yeah, usually when the trade winds shut off, though, we get more of these local breezes. We always get that sea breeze on the Kona side of Big Island. So sometimes just shutting off of the trades and the orientation of the wind to our topography, we get the island plume. You get a actual wind off an island in like Molokai, it's called the Molokai plume, and it will form right over us, and it will flood the eastern side of Oahu. So a lot of times it's that disruption in the trades. It's that different direction in the trades, and if it focuses on the terrain a certain way, that's when you see those juicy clouds begin to anchor in the terrain, and that's when you get that anchoring, when they're not moving, and you're paying attention to the radar, like, oh, this is not moving, this is not good. That's when you can kind of get ahead of it.
Bill, I don't know if he's a weather nerd, but it's a good point. He says the 2018 storm that pounded Kauaʻi actually hit Oahu the night before, meaning it was on the move over the course of a day, but then it parked itself or stalled over Kauaʻi. What causes a storm to stall, and is there any way to predict that one will?
It's all in your wind direction, really. It's in orientation to the terrain. So here we have a lot of what we call smaller scale microclimates.
Right.
And it depends on what's upstream of you. So in Kauaʻi, you might get an Oahu plume. You might get the winds oriented in a way to where you're pluming that moisture towards or funneling towards that downstream island. And a lot of times it's when you do not have trades, when you have the weak winds that occur. And of course, we talk about the Kona lows when the winds come up from the south. That's another hazard as well.
Yeah, the 2018 event specifically, there were trade winds at the bottom, and then there were upper level winds that were the opposite. And so when air rose, it kind of just came back down in the same place. And so,
But you guys can predict this?
Absolutely.
Really? I mean, no, I'm looking at you skeptically because, I mean, I live in Makakilo, and it's sort of strange that sometimes under certain winter conditions, right at 3 o'clock, it rains like crazy.
No, there's
and
limitations. There's obviously limitations to the science, you know. I'll have folks that say, oh, it's going to start, in my app here, it's going to start raining at 3 p.m. and it's going to stop at 3:30. I'm like, well, that's just a weather model. That's what we call a deterministic model. It's one run, one event. What we like to look at in the Weather Service is more probabilistic modeling. And we have a lot of different models giving us a family of models. Is it easy to predict? Absolutely not. Are we going to miss a lot? Absolutely. But we definitely, the science is improving, and I think, again, experience, living here on the islands and knowing the wind patterns and when things will anchor on the terrain is very important.
that culturally, the Native Hawaiians have that in their history. Of
right, look
the wind.
at the sky.
If you hear the wind, doing a certain thing, then you can take action.
Absolutely. Looking at the sky and understanding what's coming up is very important.
So what is a rain bomb, asks Lauren. Is this a new term, or is it just used more often than it used to be? We could have this whole conversation about king tides, but the rain bomb.
Rain bomb.
Well, we called it a rain bomb when it sat over Kauaʻi.
You know, there's all these little colloquialisms that pop up, and you know, we've got the polar vortex, and we have this atmospheric river. I would say the rain bomb is. Yes, exactly. Pineapple Express.
That's not a new term, but I think rain bomb is a new
rain
term.
bomb is a new term, but if I were to think about it, when I think of bombing, I think of like pressures falling, like a cyclogenesis, to use a fancy term where you have a really deepening pressure. I would think a rain bomb would be categorized as a rainfall rate. You have an intense rainfall rate over a short period of time, and that would be a bomb. You'd have like a downburst type heavy rainfall. That's how I would classify it. I don't know if there's an official definition, but when I get back to the house, I'll have to look in my atmospheric glossary to see if that's actually
So which islands in Hawaii, a viewer email, which islands in Hawaii are more prone to flooding due to landscape and topography?
That's a great question. I'd say any and all.
You think about it.
Yeah.
And you know, it depends on the wind direction.
Yeah.
It's all about the wind. That's what they say. That's what they say in
winds,
Lahaina for
winds,
sure. Please explain the mechanics of a flash flood. I understand a stream or river rising during a rainstorm, but what causes a wall of water, sometimes several feet high, to suddenly appear beside something obvious like a dam breach? I think we need to talk about this a little bit, about debris primarily, right?
Yeah, but I don't think it has to have debris. But imagine that you have some really, really heavy rain confined to a small space. Downstream, it's going to seem like a wall of water, but you know, it just came all at once. Does anybody have a better way to think
of it? Like my colleague talked about this. It's like a sponge. You know, you have land, depending on where you live. If it's lava rock, if it's soil, it depends on how much rain you've gotten leading up to that event. If that sponge is totally saturated, it's not going to take much rain to initiate flooding. If you've gone through a dry period, maybe it takes more rain because the ground is absorbing that. So you have to think about what time of year you're in. A heavy rainfall this time of year is going to have different results than a heavy rainfall in February or March in the cooler months, in the more wet months. So you have to think about the time of season you're in.
Let me throw this out, and I'm going to twist the question to my interest. The past 3 major floods at Kauaʻi caused massive damage to homes in Koloa, west of Waita Reservoir. What has Kauaʻi County done to study the Waita Dam, although this is your job, right, studying the Waita Dam, and prevention steps to prevent future flooding to this area? But I also wanted to bring up, you know, we have all these stream diversions that have been installed and divert streams. Are we safer from flash floods because of those diversions? I mean, do they control the water at all? Or I'm wondering if those diversions give some Hawaii areas a particularly strange flooding pattern. I mean, I guess most of these are old sugar and pineapple dams that you're working with. Right. But there's also all these structures that come down from them and go into the streams and stuff.
Well, I would say that Kaloa Town is in a high risk area for flooding on the flood insurance rate maps.
This is West Kauaʻi. Right. Right,
So
west.
Poipua,
South.
yeah.
I call it west. Even though I know
You spent Iniki there, right?
I spent a Niki there, right?
But I would say that, you know, the Waita Reservoir hasn't flown its spillway where it's filled up to that point where it would actually flood for quite a while. And so it's been years. And I think that the flooding events that they're seeing, that watershed there above Koloa Town is huge. It comes from a lot of different areas. And that's...
Mount Waialeale is up there at the top, right? Isn't it? Yeah, the wettest place on Earth, supposedly. I don't know if it's still the wettest place on Earth. You know, we promised our viewers that we would talk about immediate actions to take when you're caught in a flash flood. Around the table, I mean, what if you're out and about and trying to get, like, when people were stuck in town and wanted to get out to Hawaii Kai, and it's dark and it's nighttime, I mean, what should people do, you know, when they're hearing there might be flash flooding somewhere, or they're seeing it in front of them? What should they do if they're in their car, for example? Anybody want to?
Well, everybody's going to have their own individual story as far as what that's why it's so important to have a plan, by the way. But, you know, I said earlier, your home is your safe space. But what if you have a family member that you want to get to? Maybe they're diabetic, or maybe they have a health condition.
Elderly.
Or what if your kids are at school and you're scared about that? You know, this is the situation where you need to have a plan to communicate with your kids about what you're going to do. But I would say typically to stay in your home. You know, FEMA's got some great information, as does the Red Cross, on developing plans. But it's having that plan and not being caught by surprise. You know, even if you are caught by surprise, I would say most of the time, do not be in your vehicle, not in your car. You want to be in an area where you're stationed. You don't want to be in an area where you could get washed away. And that's what I would say is, you know, think about your plan right now. You're obviously watching this show. So once the show is over, go to FEMA.gov, go to the weather.gov site, start getting your tools together and thinking about your worst situation or where you're at right now. If you're new to the community, start asking your neighbors. You know, I like this whole community thing. You know, instead of adopting a highway, maybe adopt a stream.
Let me ask others of you, though. You're in this business, right? All of you, your professions involve concerns about flooding. In your own mind, do you picture yourself getting stuck? And what would you do if you're in your car and you're seeing, I mean, obviously turn around, don't drown, but we have places where there would be flash flooding behind you and flash flooding in front of you at the same time. Should you get out of your car and walk? What should you do?
Don't put yourself in that situation.
Well, but okay, but
if you are in that situation.
it happens fast, and it's a long drive, and it's only one highway. So I'm curious what people
when
should
you were
do.
talking, I was thinking I would drive somewhere, preferably uphill, go inside, stay safe, whether that's a restaurant, a friend's house. And then when you mentioned your kids are at school, I was like, oh no.
Right.
And so I guess the answer would be that hope that the teachers are keeping them safe, and don't, if I can't get from A to B, that like don't put myself in danger to do that. I guess that would be my answer.
I think, you know, some of the incidences where we've had people pass away during flash floods have been when they're doing outdoor recreation. And there have been multiple cases on Kauaʻi where people got caught because they actually tried to cross a flooding stream or river. In those cases, they should have just waited it out, stay on high ground until the threat passes.
Yeah, because it's going to go down.
Eventually it will. And if you are out in the outdoors, you should be prepared and take shelter and, you know, don't cross that water hazard.
Are visitors to Kauai made aware of this?
So, you know, there's some information that, you know, can be provided at the hotels. When people arrive at the airports, there's some information mainly about high surf and things like that. But, you know, a lot of the lodging accommodations do try to caution, you know, the visitors before they go out and about, you know, if there is a particular weather threat at the time. But general information, maybe not as easily available.
You know, Edwin, I was just wondering if you had a rain event like we had that created a Koloko was unique. Koloko was unique because the owner of the dam had affected its dam. But if your sensors or whatever said this dam is about to go, I remember there was an alert like that for Haleiwa once. And of course they sent me to Haleiwa. But what should people do if they hear that and their home is in danger?
I would follow whatever the emergency personnel, the emergency management agencies and the police, the fire direct you to do. I think from going through these emergency action plans, they're dynamic. And sometimes this would be the shelter that you would normally go to, but because of something that's happening out in during that event, they may be directing you somewhere else. And so you really want to be aware. You want to listen to what people are telling you and act right away. And I do want to add on to one other caution for parents, when they have kids that are out there and during rain events. There are a number of these detention basins that are being built now for flood protection, flood retentions in a lot of these communities. And
kids love to play in them.
And what we do for our operators on dams is that we warn them that those outlet plugs, the culverts at the bottom, they're very dangerous.
Yes, I actually, good point, and I have to stop because we're done.
Okay.
So mahalo to you folks at home for joining us tonight, and we thank our guests, Kauaʻi Emergency Administration, Elton Ushio, and Associate Professor of Atmospheric Sciences, Alison Nugent, DLNR Dam Safety Section Head, Edwin Matsuda, and National Weather Service Meteorologist, Patrick Blood. Next week on Insights, 1 in 3 Hawaii residents rely on Medicaid for their health insurance coverage, and federal changes to Medicaid are coming. How will the changes affect Hawaii residents, and what should people do to prepare? Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.